Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's Angli Et Nex here, and yes, you are seeing correctly. I am on a different game. I am not playing Neverwinter. That is kind of a big deal, I guess you could say, because most of my channels have been devoted solely to Neverwinter. But in lieu of the Necromancer coming out, I wanted to switch to Diablo. Not full time, just to play, putz around. I picked it up a long time ago. Diablo's been always a favorite of mine. Neverwinter just took up the majority of my time. Now I'm back, splitting my time between Diablo and Neverwinter. Just wanted to show you some of the things that I'm working through. Currently on my Barbarian, Whirl Wind Barb, running high, pretty good, solid greater rifts for not having perfectly rolled gear, ancient legendary, or even the primal legendary gear. Basically just running on the bare bones sets, fairly, mid-range to low level gems, legendary gems, so to speak. And other than that, just running it. My buddy Bladaga, as you know, if you've seen from in the past, him in my past streams, he'll be coming in as well. Not sure what he's going to play. He has a really nasty Hammered In Crusader, but he also has a wizard and has a decent necromancer. So that's basically what's going to happen. I'm just going to putz around a little bit until he comes on. Other than that, you guys just enjoy. I'm going to probably run some basic riffs for myself just to try and level up some gems even further. But I'm going to go quiet for a while, so just enjoy, sit back, relax, enjoy the fun, watch the carnage, all that good stuff. When I come into... Well, actually, I'll just go over it right now. I'll show you the build that I'm using currently. Don't mind all the garbage in my inventory. So I'm currently on my tanky sort of health globe build for the Whirlwind Barb. So I'm using the Little Rogue with Amethyst in the weapons, or I'm using the Little Rogue and the Slanderer. Both have Amethyst, just because I don't necessarily need to deal the damage. My buddy Bladaga, if he's on his Hammered In, the guy's got over 2 million paper damage and buffs himself up some kind of stupid. It's crazy. Basically, with my stats looking the way they are right now, being able to tank and produce health globes, we did an 85 together, and I wasn't really doing any damage. So it was basically all him doing the damage, me buffing his defense and a little bit of his offense, and then producing health globes to keep him alive, and just keeping everybody, for as much as I can, CC'd, just so that he can stay alive and bring that pure octane offense that he has. So Slanderer and Little Rogue. The biggest thing here is the what they do for each other. So each time you spend a primary resource, gain 6% increased attack speed, damage, and armor for 5 seconds, and it stacks up to 5 times. So 6% times 5, we all know that's 30. So for me, as a Whirlwind Barb, I am constantly spending my primary resource. So I basically have 30% increased attack speed, damage, and armor all the time. And then you have the waste set. So you've got your 2 set, which is increase the damage of your second Rend, or per second of Rend for 500% in this duration, to 15 seconds. So I am using Rend. I'm using a rune that basically gives you increase the bleeding enemies take 10% increased damage from all sources. But I'll get into that in just a moment. And then the 4 set, during Whirlwind, you gain 50% damage reduction, and your applied Rends deal triple damage. So that's a pretty big deal. And then 6 set is Whirlwind gains the effect of the Dust Devil rune, and all Whirlwind damage is increased by 800%. So we're just using this essentially to keep our Whirlwind up, gain the 50% damage reduction, and still deal a little bit of damage, and gain that Dust Devil's rune, just because you send out the little tornadoes, which can crit and produce health globes for us. So basically what I'm running here is full 6 set of wastes, of the waste set. And I will eventually be running all diamonds in my armor. I just didn't have enough, so I had to supplement a couple rubies in there. But the Pride of Cassius is a pretty big deal as well. Increases our ignore pain, the duration by 5 seconds, which helps us out a lot, especially the rune that I'm using buffs the team's defense as well, which we'll get into that in just a moment. The only piece of primal gear that I have pretty much that's worth a darn, the rest of them have been salvaged because they were just too many bad stats on them. But this compass rose is amazing, and on top of that, it's amazing. So we've got a compass rose with a Bane of the Stricken, which will be swapped out eventually to the Bane of the Stricken on this build will be swapped out to a invigorating gem, which increases my healing done and gives me immunity to control impairing effects. So in the off chance that my iron skin goes down, which is not very often because I've got pretty good CDR, so I can keep it up, and the Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac as well is a big thing. Keeps everything pretty much off cooldown within the duration of its own cooldown. So basically, as soon as cooldown is finished, that's basically right when the buff is gone. So essentially 100% uptime, but in those situations where maybe I'm having some resource management issues, things like that, that invigorating gem is just going to help push me over the top, make me so I don't get stunned, snared, jailed, walled, anything like that, and increase my healing on top of it. And then have the Ring of the Zodiac, which, like I said, every time you spend a resource, it reduces your one of your skills cooldowns by 1 second. So we're constantly spending resource with Whirlwind, and then also constantly spending resource with Rend. So that is a pretty big deal. It keeps our cooldowns pretty much on cooldown. And I'm using the Taiguk, which the Taiguk gain 33.84% increased damage for 1.5 seconds when you spend primary resource on a channeled skill, which is Whirlwind, is a channeled skill. Stacks up to 10 times. So essentially that adds up to 38.4% increased damage, and then later on, remaining cooldowns, let's see, scroll down here. Gain 2% increase armor for every stack, so you gain 20% increase armor on top of that, which helps us out a lot. Obviously the Slanderer, I am using Nemesis Bracers, mainly just for keeping us ahead in the Greater Rift schedule. So every pylon that we pick up, every shrine that we pick up, will spawn a elite pack or a champion, so that we can burn it down, and that just puts us a little bit farther ahead. So that means we're adding more elite packs to sometimes a very sparse Greater Rift, where it seems like you're running for 30 seconds and you still haven't found another elite pack yet. That can help out a lot if you run into a pylon of some sort. So that just helps us keep us ahead, and it just adds to it. So if you've already got a chocked full group of elite packs and things like that, you can grab a pylon and just add on top of that, because now if you've got if you're getting pretty good mob cluster and elite pack concentration, then this will just add to it and put you way ahead of a schedule. Now the Traveler's Pledge, this works in conjunction with the Compass Rose and gives you the Endless Walk passive, which while moving, damage taken is reduced by up to 50%. While standing still, damage dealt is increased by up to 100%. Now, in this build, I'm constantly moving, so that basically means I have 50% damage reduction at all times, which is nice. So that's a constant thing. The only downside is when I switch to my DPS build, I'm constantly moving, so I don't get the offensive buff per se, but that defensive buff is still very nice. And in this necklace, I'm using the Esoteric Alteration, gain a certain percentage minus 33.5 non-physical damage reduction, which is anything, arcane, poison, lightning, all the elemental stuff. And so that's damage reduction, which helps me be tanky. And then while below 50% life, my resistances to the elements is increased by 75%, which with this build, I have yet to be killed. Other than I got one shot once by a group that I hadn't. Basically, there was an elite pack. As soon as I walked in the door, didn't even get a chance to get my buffs off and got smacked. That's about the only time that I get hurt. Other than that, let's see. So I'm using full waist set, and then using the Selenium in the cube, which critical hits have a 4% chance to spawn a health globe. So that's some of where health globes come from. Mantle of Channeling, basically 25% increased damage and increased damage reduction while channeling a skill. So Whirlwind is the first one on that list, while channeling Whirlwind, Rapid Fire, Strafe, blah, 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 blah. 25% increased damage and damage reduction. And then the Band of Might, after casting Furious Charge, Ground Stomp, Leap, you take 60% reduced damage for 6 seconds. My Ground Stomp cooldown is like 3 seconds, so that's going to be up constantly. So that's a pretty big one to keep us as tanky as possible. Not have to worry about dying. We can stay right in the middle of the mobs, keep those crits up to get those health orbs coming out. So we'll go over the skills here. So first skill is Juggernaut. Obviously, just a little bit more control impairing effects, reducing that by 50%. And then if I do somehow become immobilized, which is not very often, I recover 20% of my life. The duration of my shouts are doubled. After using a shout, you and your allies within 100 yards regenerate 3% of their maximum life per second for 120 seconds. So basically for 2 minutes, constantly, you are going to be receiving 3% of your life all the time because I shout all the time. Tough as Nails increase armor by 25%. I'm not doing any thorns, so the thorns part doesn't really matter, but the percentage of armor is also very nice on that one as well. And then reduce all non-physical damage taken. When you take damage from a ranged or elemental attack, you have a chance to gain 2 Fury, which helps me out a lot because I'm not using a passive that says you no longer degenerate Fury. So I have to be hitting things or getting hit to generate Fury. So, and this helps us out even a little more. So in my A button, which you can place these any way you want to, this is just the setup that works best for me. And your A button, this is not necessarily your primary, but it is one of your main actives. I'm using Rend, which makes enemies bleed within 12 yards of you for 1100 weapon damage. I'm using the Mutilate rune. Affected enemies are chilled and take 10% increased damage from all sources. What that means is it takes 10% more damage from me, my buddy Bladaga, my mom, my sister, whatever, your cousin, whatever, anybody that is playing with us, they're going to be taking 10% increased damage from anyone that is on my team. So if I'm running solo, it doesn't really matter just because my Templar companion isn't going to go in there and do some serious deeps, but it's still, you get what I mean. And then we're doing on my right trigger. It's just easiest to hold a trigger down for me instead of trying to hold a button down. You kind of get a sore, bruised thumb if you have to button mash that much. So Whirlwind, which basically you spin around in a circle and you deal damage. We're using Wind Shear. You gain 1 Fury for every enemy struck, which that basically can count for the same enemy. As long as you keep hitting things, you are going to gain Fury. And especially the way that you move, you kind of go on just like either a figure 8 pattern, or you just kind of do in a like concentric circle, just spinning in circles. I kind of move counterclockwise just because it's easier for my thumb to move it that way than trying to go the other way. And then ground stomp. You smash the ground, stunning all enemies within 14 yards for 4 seconds. And we're using Jarring Slam. Enemies have a chance, 10% chance to drop a health globe. So there's part of our health globes. Threatening Shout. Shout with great ferocity. Reducing damage done by enemies within 25 yards by 20% for 15 seconds. So that's reducing the enemy's damage so that A, helps the DPS, which is my buddy Bladaga, and it helps me because I'm not getting hit as hard. And he's not getting hit as hard. And I'm using Grim Harvest. Enemies are badly shaken and have a 15% chance to drop a health globe. Or health globes. Ignore Pain. Ironhide. I think I said Iron Skin. Iron Skin is the Crusaders version of this, essentially. Not the same, I guess. So, Ignore Pain with Ironhide. Reduce all damage taken by 50% and gain immunity to all control impairing effects for 5 seconds. And actually, I am going to change this to allies within 50 yards gain 25% damage reduction and immunity to control impairing effects for 5 seconds. Now, with my Obsidian Ring, I can keep that up pretty much constantly. There may be 1 second left that it might go down, but your survivability running 85s, 85 plus if you're a DPS and you get one shot as soon as one little buff goes down, probably need to build a little bit more tanky. Just saying. So I'm going to do mob rule there just to give everybody in my party added defense and immunity to control impairing effects, which if you control the DPS, you take them out of the game, goes a lot slower because they can't do anything. So they're not going to get jailed, they're not going to get frozen, they're not going to get anything. They're just going to be sitting there doing what they do. That doesn't necessarily mean they don't take damage, they're just not going to get controlled. So, last but not least, Warcry. And these also generate Fury for us, which help us out a lot. Unleash a Rallying Cry to increase armor for you and your allies within 100 yards by 20%. And then increase resistance to all elements by 20% while affected by a Warcry. So you're getting 20% increased armor, and then basically 20% resist all. So with that, you're buffing your team. You're doing it offensively a little bit with Rend, and then defensively basically with everything else. And then on top of that, you've got your, this is just my setup. If you wanted to go full tank, you could throw all of your points, take the points out of strength, throw all of them into vitality, get your movement speed up to that 25% cap, max out your fury, and then you could throw them all into vitality if you wanted to. Me, I still like to I kind of classify myself as a Z DPS, where you're not the main DPS, you're not a secondary DPS, you're like bottom rung, but you're still doing a little bit of damage enough to help, but you're also doing a lot of other things, buffing, things like that. You Neverwinter guys know what I'm talking about. If you play a Master Flame Control Wizard, Cleric, Paladin, anything like that, you know how the Z DPS kind of thing works. The buff DPS guy. With this, you don't necessarily have to load up like this. It would probably actually be a little bit smarter now that I'm thinking about it to take some out of crit damage and max out my attack speed. Mainly because the faster I attack, the more potential for crits. You don't want to take it out of crit hit chance, because part of our solution to creating those health globes is by critting. So you want to have your crit chance as high as possible. So I could actually take the points out of crit hit damage and put them into attack speed. But because when you use the loadout system in Diablo, it doesn't change your paragons and doesn't save them the way that they were. It'll just stay the way that you change it to. So I just leave it the way that I want it for my DPS build, because I really only run this build when I'm with someone else. So I want my damage to be as high as possible. And then obviously this one is basically all tanky, life, armor, resist all before you get to life per second. Life per second is almost like regen for all you Neverwinter guys out there. Not that important of a stat. And then on this one, obviously gold find is the least of all of these. I would do resource cost reduction and life per hit first. Get all your points into those as fast as possible. Then work on your area damage. Area damage is a very, very, very secondary potential for damage, because it's a chance. It's a chance to deal area damage, but you're going to increase your area damage by 50%. And then gold find, obviously, we're kind of swimming in gold at this point. You run greater rifts. It's kind of a big deal. It's pretty easy, pretty simple. So, but that's basically the build. I'm going to run and putz around, see where my bloody Bloodog is at, see if I can get him in here, and yeah, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
I'm not as bad as I look, really. Stop walking away!
And just so you guys know, I will be posting these broadcasts onto YouTube. You can check my YouTube channel. Just type in Angli Et Nex, just like my gamer tag here. So it's just spelled just like that. ANGLI space ET space NEX. And you'll find me on YouTube. And there are links on my YouTube to other things, like my Facebook page that I have primarily set up just for videos. Right now there's only Neverwinter on there, so if you're a Diablo guy, just sit tight. I'm going to be getting you some Diablo videos for sure. But there's links to my Twitter, my Instagram, Facebook, like I said. So I've got all these things, and my Twitch, which is what you're seeing right here. So you can go on there, go to YouTube. You can see basically what I'm doing at any time. I try to go on Twitch, and, try to get not really an RSVP, but at least, at some point during the day tell people, hey, I'm planning to stream tonight. This is about the time that I'm thinking I'm going to stream. And then I usually give, like, tonight, gave a 2-minute roll call saying, hey, in 2 minutes I'm going to start my stream, so go ahead and get down on there. And I didn't do it yet, but normally I announce, hey, I'm now live, so come and watch me, and I'll post my Twitch feed URL there, which I am going to do right now. But like I said, after I complete this broadcast, it will be put on in its entirety on YouTube for your viewing pleasure. So just sit tight for a minute while I finish up a couple of things on Twitter, trying to get those posts out there, and then I will start running some content for you guys and stop boring you to death. Alrighty, so this is Torment 13, and just to show you a little bit of what it can do, this is the tanking ability, which I'm actually going to swap off just because I don't think I'll have the damage to really do anything quickly. So I'll go to my loadout screen and do my Whirlwind, which is 0. And obviously, as you can see, damage went up quite a bit just by changing, my weapons, things like that. So on top of those, basically nothing changed except my weapons. They have emeralds in them, and my bracers changed because I'm using lightning skill, so I want that lightning skill damage. And then because my whirlwind knocks things back, I will gain that increased damage there. But on top of all this, skill-wise, everything else is the same. Oh, I lied. Skull Grasp. This, I will increase damage to Whirlwind by 286%. If you get a nice, decent roll, that can roll up to 300%, I believe. But I'm using that instead of the Obsidian Ring of Zodiac, I think is what I was using on the other build. But I have that in my cube. So I'm still using the Obsidian Ring in some regard, whether it's in my cube or on my person. I'm using the Mantle of Channeling for the same reasons as before, and then the Furnace just to do increased damage to elites. And then I'll just run through these kind of quick. Rampage, increased strength, by 1%. For killing or assisting in a kill, stacks up to 25 times, so basically 25% increased strength. Deal additional 25% damage while near maximum fury, which I get to maximum fury very quickly. Reduce the cooldowns of those things, mainly Wrath of the Berserker. That's a big deal. That's a huge damage increase for us. And then Ruthless, additional damage, 40% additional damage to enemies below 30% health. So we go Wrath of the Berserker with the Insanity Rune for the 50% increased damage. Ignore Pain, Ironhide just increases the duration effect of Ignore Pain. Battle Fury with the swords of plowshares, critical hits heal me and my pets for that amount of life, which that changes between each character. But it increases my critical chance and my damage, and lasts for 2 minutes. Ground Stomp. This Ground Stomp is a different rune, so Wrenching Smash. Basically, it pulls everybody to me, so I use that a lot. It's one of my 2 main spammable abilities, just because basically what I do is I'm whirlwinding all the time, but I hit Ground Stomp to try and pull a big mob to me. And then what I do is I hit Rend, because I'm still using the same thing, the Mutilate rune, which increases my damage by 10%. So I pull a big group to me, use Rend, they're bleeding, they're taking increased damage, and then I just sit there in the middle of them and just keep spinning the wind with Whirlwind. And Whirlwind's the same as well. So, and then obviously Paragon points and all that is the same. Running solo, it's going to be a little bit different here. I put the Ejang Do or Unjang Do on here just because when he hits people, has a chance to freeze. Got the Oculus Ring and then a Nagel Ring. Nagel Ring helps with a little bit with Magic Find, but mainly it's just a placeholder right now. Those lunatics do deal a pretty good amount of damage, but as you go up in the greater rifts, you'll just see them less and less become effective. And then ultimately, if I had the shield, you would want the freeze deflection. He has a chance to block, and every time he blocks, it has a chance to freeze the enemy. So basically just more CC. And then I got basically all heals and stuns. So that's what we do. And now you could run a Unity. If you can find a place on your person to run the Unity. That's the only hard part right now, is trying to find that place for it. So, which I'm actually going to get rid of some of these blood shards so I can actually do what I need to do. Not have a bunch of junk. Well, I'm going to have a bunch of junk in my inventory, but it'll be alright. So I'll just run a normal rift here, and then if I don't hear back from my buddy Bladaga, I'll probably take a break just for a moment, just to see if I can get him in the party, and then after that, we'll roll on and get you guys back on track. You'll see what his damage is going to look like. And as you can see, it takes just a minute to build up the Fury at first, so you can't really activate your abilities right off the bat. So it makes it kind of hard, but you can do Ground Stomp, which does generate Fury, which helps out significantly. So that helps us out a lot, doing your Ground Stomp, making sure that you're hitting proper enemies, things like that. And I mean, Torment 13 is kind of a joke for this barb, so it's not that big of a deal. But anyhow, just basically watch how I run through this. So I pull in, use my Rend a couple of times to make sure everybody's bleeding, and then I just work in circles and keep pulling them in, keep rocking my... the only bad thing I don't like about it is you actually have to stop whirlwinding to activate Berserker's Wrath. if they could make that to where you could activate Berserker's Wrath without having to stop, it would be disgusting. I mean, you could just do everything so seamless. The only problem is in higher rifts, you stop whirlwinding, you lose a huge majority of your defensive capabilities because you're not channeling anymore, which means your Taiga stacks start going down, and then your mantle of channeling also goes down, which that could result in a one-shot, especially as a little bit more squishy DPS. You start having issues with your rift bosses, things like that. But other than that, it's a pretty seamless build.
Won't go down easily.
Seeing if I had my Nemesis bracers on, even just grabbing that little shrine would have spawned an elite pack or a boss or whatever it may be, and it would have just furthered the rift a little bit more. But this is just a basic rift. I'm really not too worried about it. Anybody worth their salt can basically do, if you're running I say endgame. That's another way of talking. If you're running, builds, you've got pretty much all ancient legendary stuff, or you've got your build set up properly,
My pack is full.
to where you have the proper gear, the gems, the setup, you're gonna just fly through Torment 13. Torment 13, like I said earlier, for this, is kind of a joke, especially single player. It's a joke. The damage gets increased, and the enemies get harder as you have more people in your party. So me running this solo it's like a joke.
I'm overburdened.
I keep saying this, but it really is. I mean, it's just easy. Just chase guys down. Just keep spinning the wind. That's what you gotta do. Especially these guys. I mean, you can really see the bleed damage on these. As you can see there, even on Torment 13, they do still hurt. Just because, I let my Ignore Pain go down. Wasn't really paying attention. I was more worried about my offensive buffs staying up than my defensive buffs, and it does hurt. It really does hurt. So
I'm carrying too much.
And of course I'm full of junk because I spent all my shards and I can't pick up these legendaries. Not like it really matters. But I'm gonna go back to town, get rid of some junk so I can pick up some legendaries, and then I will be ready to go. So basically what I was planning on doing, why I have all this Immortal King stuff in my inventory, is I was planning on making a Frenzy Barb. So that's why I have all this junk in here, using the Immortal King set. I'm gonna get rid of that puzzle ring. Gotta keep those. Prepare my gear, and I'm just gonna dip right back in, and I'll be done here in just a couple minutes. And I just got a text from my buddy, Bladaga, so he said he is ready to rock. But I will take just a short break before I get him in here, just to get him lined out on what we're doing. And then we'll be right back with you guys, so don't worry too much. It's not going to be crazy.
Stand before me.
So you'll see me at times stop whirlwinding, especially like in transition, just because I don't want to waste the Fury, because the Fury is a hot commodity. So if I'm in transition, I try not to, like right now, there's no mobs immediately around me, and we're just running to the door, so I'm not going to whirlwind down there. But once you see a mob come on your screen, start whirlwinding so you can get your stacks up. So like that one was a little bit closer than what I generally like to do, but it was mainly because it was a ghosty guy, and they kind of just fly where they want to. Fly wherever they please. So, and these mallet lords will hurt you even on Torment 13. I mean, I've only got like, I don't know, 17, almost 18 million defense, I guess, unbuffed. I'm not sure what I'll jump up to when I am buffed. 95.5. So that's still not very much in the grand scheme of things. When it comes down to pushing those higher greater rifts, I've done an 84 by myself. Can't remember. I play every tune, so it's hard for me to remember all the time. But basically, I can still do it, you know, by myself. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. It's not that big of a deal to run by yourself. The only thing is, you've got to increase your resistances, and you have to increase your damage when you go up to 2-mans, 3-mans, 4-mans. 2-mans is I think they gain 10% for each ally. So 10 or 20%, I don't remember. So 20% more damage, 20% more health. For each ally that you have. So, and especially if you're trying to help a buddy out, you know, drag him through some greater rifts, get him some Paragon levels, things like that, get him some decent gear if he's just a fresh level 70. You know, having that third person can kind of suck, especially when they're not necessarily doing anything. It can suck because you have to compensate for that, so you have to be able to take the hits at a 20 or 40% increased capacity, and be able to deal out the damage at a 20 or 40% increased capacity, whichever one it is. So that's basically the Rift, guys. That's how I run my DPS build. But I'm going to get my buddy in here, and then we will be right back with you. So sit tight and don't worry too much. It'll be a short little break here.